The fluorescent lights buzzed like tired bees above the marble corridor of the Collins Grand Hotel. Midnight had long passed, but the luxury suites on the top floor still gleamed, each one a silent monument to wealth Amara Johnson would never touch. Her reflection in the polished elevator doors looked like a stranger, eyes ringed with fatigue, uniforms stiff from bleach, and fingers cracked from too many hours holding a mop. She had been cleaning since dawn, covering 2 shifts, because Tasha, the night maid, couldn't deal with these rich folks tonight. Amara had smiled and said yes. Rent was due. Again. She pushed her cart down the hall to the presidential suite 1101, the last one of the night, the one she always dreaded. Inside, the air smelled like imported lavender and money, gold fixtures, crystal chandeliers, a bathtub bigger than her kitchen sink back home in Southside Atlanta. For a second, she just stood there, dizzy from exhaustion and the absurdity of it all. "Who needs a bathroom this big?" she muttered, scrubbing the tiles that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Her hands moved automatically, wipe, rinse, polish, repeat. The sound of her rag against porcelain became hypnotic. She knelt to clean around the tub, resting her head on her arm for just a second. Just a second, she promised herself. And then darkness. The next sound she heard was a man's voice, sharp, startled, and close. What the Amara jerked awake. The mop bucket toppled water, spreading like a silver puddle beneath her knees. Her eyes focused on the tall man standing in the doorway, shirt half open, face stunned. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine cover, pale skin, dark hair, slicked back, a watch that could pay off her student loans. "Who are you?" His tone was clipped, the kind used by men who never heard no. Amara's brain scrambled for words. I work here," she stammered, rising so fast she nearly slipped. "I must have fallen asleep." "In my bathroom?" His eyebrows lifted. Disbelief painted across his face. "I was cleaning," she said, hands raised instinctively like she'd done something criminal. "Just a long day. I didn't mean to." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Security should screen the staff better. That word staff hit her like a slap. Not people, not woman, just staff. "I don't need security to tell me when I'm tired," she muttered, almost under her breath. He looked up surprised. "Excuse me?" Amara froze. "You don't talk back," she reminded herself. Not here, not to someone like him. But exhaustion had eroded her caution. "I said I'm sorry. It won't happen again." He folded his arms. "It better not. What's your name, Amara Johnson?" The moment hung between them, his name Collins silent but known. Arthur Collins, the billionaire CEO. The face on the hotel magazine covers she dusted every week without a second glance. He studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly, not cruel but curious. "You sound educated. Not the usual tone I hear from—" He didn't finish the sentence, but she heard it anyway. "From people like you." Amara's lips tightened. "From maids," she said quietly. "You can say it. We all know what this uniform means to you." He blinked momentarily, disarmed by her directness. "You've got an attitude, Ms. Johnson." "I've got 2 jobs," she replied, voice steady now. "The attitude comes free." Something flickered in his expression, a mix of surprise and reluctant respect, but pride wouldn't let him show it. "Well, Ms. Johnson, you can collect your things. I'll inform management about this incident." The finality in his tone hit her harder than she expected. She needed this job, not just for the paycheck, but for the insurance that covered her mother's medication. Desperation cracked her voice. "Please, sir, don't fire me. I swear it wasn't on purpose. I just—" He cut her off, tone cooling again. "You fell asleep in my private suite. What am I supposed to think?" Her eyes burned, but she didn't blink. "Think that some people have to work twice as hard just to be half awake." Silence filled the room. For the first time, he looked uncertain. She stepped toward the door, gathering her cleaning supplies. "I'll finish the room and be gone in 10 minutes. You won't see me again." Before she could leave, he noticed the mop water still glistening on the floor. "Wait." He reached for a towel and began wiping the puddle himself. The richest man in the hotel crouched beside the janitor. Amara stared. "You don't have to." He interrupted, his tone softer now. "You were right about one thing. "What's that?" He glanced up. "The coffee in this place really is terrible." For the first time all night, Amara almost smiled. The next morning, Amara woke to the sound of her neighbor's baby crying through the paper-thin walls. Her alarm clock flashed 6:12 a.m. She hadn't slept more than an hour, her mind replaying every moment from last night. His face, his voice, that humiliating phrase, "Staff should be screened better." By sunrise, she was already on the bus heading back to work. The city outside looked gray, washed in early light and rain. Inside, people avoided each other's eyes. Construction workers, night nurses, janitors like her. The invisible crew that made Atlanta's skyline shine. At the back of the bus, Amara scrolled through job listings on her cracked phone. Nothing paid enough. Nothing came with health benefits. Her stomach turned at the thought of seeing Arthur Collins again. She knew men like him, men who thought their money exempted them from humanity. Still, she needed that paycheck. So when she walked into the staff lounge and saw her supervisor waiting clipboard in hand, she braced herself. "Johnson," Mrs. Keating said, pursing her lips. "Mr. Collins filed a report. Found you asleep in his suite." Amara's throat went dry. "Ma'am, I save it. He asked to meet you personally before I take any action." Amara blinked. He asked, "To meet me?" Mrs. Keating frowned. "Don't know why. Maybe he wants to make sure you actually exist. 5th floor executive office, 10 sharp." By the time Amara reached the glass elevator, her palms were slick with sweat. The 5th floor was another world, marble quiet and scented with imported cedar. Every step of her worn shoes echoed. Arthur's office door was open. He stood behind a desk the size of a dining table, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a stack of reports. The skyline behind him glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Ms. Johnson," he said without looking up. "Close the door." She did. The sound of it clicking shut felt like a verdict. He finally looked at her, calm, unreadable. "Rough night." "If you mean the one where I lost my dignity in your bathroom, yes, sir. It was rough." A faint twitch touched his mouth. "You're direct. I appreciate that." "Directness doesn't pay rent," she said before she could stop herself. He ignored the remark and picked up a folder. "You've been working double shifts for a week. No wonder you collapsed." Her eyebrows rose. "You checked I don't like accusing people without evidence. Is that what last night was? An accusation?" He set the file down and met her gaze. "It looked bad, Ms. Johnson, a stranger sleeping in my private suite. I reacted like anyone would. Anyone," she repeated quietly, "or anyone who thinks a black woman in a uniform doesn't belong where the marble shines too bright." The words landed like a spark in gasoline air. Arthur froze. For a second he looked genuinely struck. "That's not—" "It is," she said softly. "It always is." Silence expanded between them, thick with things neither knew how to name. Finally Arthur exhaled. "Then let's start over." "Coffee." Amara blinked. "Excuse me." He gestured to the sleek espresso machine on the counter. "You said last night it was terrible. Prove it." She stared at him. "You called me up here to critique your coffee." His lips curved slightly. "Consider it your redemption." Part of her wanted to walk out, but something in his tone challenged her pride. She crossed the room, poured a small cup, and inhaled. Within seconds, her face twisted. Smells burnt. Over-roasted beans, probably Arabica mixed with Robusta to fake strength. Too bitter. And the machine's filter hasn't been cleaned properly. Arthur raised an eyebrow. "You can tell all that from one sniff, from years of being broke," she said dryly. "Cheap coffee teaches lessons fast." For the first time, he laughed a low, surprised sound. "You're wasted on housekeeping." "I'm fine where I am," she said, though it sounded less convincing out loud. He leaned against the counter. "Where did you learn to identify roasts like that?" Amara hesitated. "College. I studied food chemistry. Didn't finish." "Why not?" Her jaw clenched. "Because banks don't hand out loans to people from my zip code unless it's for bail money." Arthur's smile faded. He wasn't used to hearing that kind of truth in his glass palace. "You could have told me last night," he said quietly, "and you would have believed me." Another silence, heavier this time, because they both knew the answer. He straightened, slipping back into composure. All right, Miss Johnson, since you're clearly an expert, help me fix this. She blinked. Excuse me, the hotel's coffee program is a disaster. If you can tell what's wrong, maybe you can tell us how to make it right. Her laugh was sharp. You want the cleaning lady to improve your 5-star blend? I want the person who just humiliated me with her nose to do it, he said evenly. Their eyes met. For a second, something unspoken passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. Two people from opposite worlds realizing the other might not fit the box they'd been put in. Amara looked down at the cup, then back at him. If I do this, it's because I need my job, not because I owe you anything. Understood, he said. Let's start tomorrow at 7, in the kitchen. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. For the record, Mr. Collins, your reaction last night wasn't just about security. He frowned. What do you mean? She met his eyes. You weren't scared because someone was in your room. You were scared because someone like me was. Then she walked out, leaving the faint scent of bleach and burnt coffee behind, and for the first time in his career, Arthur Collins had no idea which one bothered him more. By 7 the next morning, the kitchen of the Collins Grand was already alive with movement knives, chopping steam, hissing orders being shouted in clipped accents. It was a world Amara had only seen from the other side of the swinging door. Now she stood in the middle of it, still wearing her uniform, still smelling faintly of disinfectant. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward her, some curious, most hostile. The head chef, a burly man with a French accent and the permanent frown of someone allergic to humility, gave a sharp sniff. Mr. Collins said you'd be joining us. I thought he was joking. He doesn't seem like the joking type, Amara replied evenly. The chef said, crossing his arms. Housekeeping and haute cuisine, what a mix! Before she could respond, Arthur entered. His presence drew attention like gravity. The chatter died. He was dressed more casually today. White shirt sleeves rolled no tie. Even like that, he looked like authority wrapped in calm. Morning, he said to the chef. Morning, Miss Johnson. Amara nodded. Morning, Mr. Collins. He gestured toward the counter where several steaming cups and small plates waited. I want you to smell and taste these. Tell me what's wrong. The chef looked offended. Sir, with all respect, my kitchen is not a playground. Arthur didn't even glance at him. Neither is my hotel, but here we are. A few of the staff exchanged surprised looks. Amara fought to hide a smile. She stepped closer to the counter, inhaled the first cup, then grimaced. This one's using beans, roasted past second crack, she said, voice steady. It's bitter because the oils have burned, probably to hide the fact they're low quality. Arthur tilted his head, intrigued. And this? She took the second cup, sniffed again. The water's too hot. You're scorching the grounds. Plus, someone used filtered tap water instead of mineral. The chef scoffed. Impossible. She cannot smell water. Amara looked at him. You can't smell ignorance either, but I'm getting a strong whiff. A few younger cooks tried to stifle their laughter. Arthur's lips curved. Go on. She moved down the line, tasting a pastry, then a spoonful of sauce from the breakfast menu. Butter substitute, she said immediately. Low-cost margarine. It clings to the tongue like plastic. Arthur exchanged a glance with his assistant manager. You replaced the butter. The man hesitated. We adjusted for cost efficiency. Arthur's tone sharpened. At the expense of taste. Amara set down the spoon, wiping her hands on a towel. You're selling a dream, Mr. Collins. People pay not just for the room, but for how it feels to be in it. If the coffee is bad, the illusion breaks. And once it breaks, it doesn't matter how much gold is in the faucet. The room went silent. For the first time, the staff looked at her not as a maid, but as someone who understood their world better than they did. Arthur studied her face. He had built his fortune on precision on reading people like contracts. But Amara Johnson, he couldn't categorize her. She was too honest to be strategic, too confident to be invisible. Where did you learn to talk like that? He asked quietly. Graduate seminars I never got to finish, she said. Food chemistry and sensory analysis. I was supposed to be the one behind the counter, not cleaning under it. His voice softened. What happened? She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the staff who still watched her. Life happened. Debt discrimination, a professor who told me my kind didn't usually make it in fine dining research. Guess he was right. Arthur's jaw tightened. He was wrong. Amara blinked. You don't know that. I know talent when I see it, and courage when I hear it. The chef rolled his eyes, muttering something in French about sentimentality. Amara caught it and smirked. If you're going to insult me, at least do it in a language I don't speak fluently. Arthur almost laughed, and that startled both of them. He turned to the chef. We'll implement Ms. Johnson's recommendations for tomorrow's breakfast. The chef looked appalled. Sir, you can't seriously. I can. Arthur said, his tone final. And I am. When the meeting ended, Amara tried to slip away quietly, but Arthur caught up to her at the service elevator. You handled yourself well, he said. She shrugged. I've been handling myself my whole life. He nodded, then, after a pause, added, You made me see something this morning. Oh, that I've been running a world-class hotel with no idea how the world actually works. She gave a small smile. Welcome to the real world, Mr. Collins. We don't serve breakfast in bed. The elevator dinged open. She stepped inside, gripping her cart handle. And just for the record, she added, I still think your coffee's terrible. The doors began to close, but not before she caught the faintest smile breaking across his face, not the polished one he wore for investors, but something warmer, almost human. When the elevator descended, Amara leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. She knew this wasn't safety. It was a spark, and sparks in her experience burned brightest before they burned everything else. Meanwhile, upstairs, Arthur stood in the hallway staring at the closed elevator doors, realizing something unsettling for the first time in years. Someone had spoken to him without fear, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. By the next morning, rumors had already spread through the Collins Grand Hotel like spilled coffee on white linen. Did you hear? Whispered one server. The cleaning lady told the boss his coffee stinks. No, said another, laughing. She didn't? She did. In front of Chef Laurent. And he listened. The staff lounge buzzed with gossip when Amara walked in. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A few eyes flicked up from their cell phones, assessing her like she'd walked into the wrong movie. She ignored them, grabbed her gloves, clocked in. Her friend Carla, one of the few black women on staff besides her, appeared at her side, eyes wide. Girl, did you really tell Mr. Collins his coffee was trash? Amara sighed. I told him the truth. That's the same thing Carla said under her breath. You trying to get fired or famous? Neither, Amara muttered. Just trying to survive. When they entered the kitchen, it was busier than usual. The smell of butter and burnt toast hung in the air along with the tension. Chef Laurent barked orders like a general under siege. Arthur Collins stood by the counter, observing quietly, a cup in hand. The moment Amara stepped in, the noise dimmed. Laurent said loudly, Our new coffee expert has arrived. His accent stretched the words like rubber. Shall we all take notes? Oui? A few sous chefs snickered. Arthur shot him a look that silenced the laughter. Ms. Johnson is here to help, not to entertain you. Proceed. Laurent's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. Very well. Let us see what the miracle nose can teach us today. Amara kept her chin up. Miracles aren't my department, chef. I just fix mistakes. The remark drew a quiet snort from Arthur that he quickly disguised as a cough. Laurent handed her a tray. Taste this, our breakfast special. She tried the eggs first dry, the bread stale, the juice mixed concentrate too sweet. She set the tray down. This isn't breakfast. It's a warning. Laurent crossed his arms. Excusez-moi. It tastes like the ingredients were chosen by accountants, not chefs, she said. You can feel the cost-cutting in every bite. Arthur's mouth twitched again, this time not from amusement but agreement. She's right. Laurent glared. We have standards, sir. Yes, Arthur said. And we're clearly failing them. The chef turned red. You're letting a janitor humiliate me in front of my team. Amara's blood chilled at the word. Janitor. Arthur's expression hardened. I'm letting talent speak for itself. That's what this hotel is supposed to represent. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Laurent finally muttered something about nonsense experiments and stalked off. Amara exhaled quietly, aware of the stares still burning holes in her back. Good work, Arthur said. Now let's improve the coffee service. As he led her toward the tasting counter, she felt the eyes of the staff follow them, some resentful, some curious, a few silently rooting for her. She knew that look. She'd seen it in classrooms and interviews in neighborhoods where people smiled at her mother but locked their doors as she passed. Prejudice didn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wore a chef's hat or a designer suit. Arthur poured 2 cups and handed her one. "Same blend as yesterday," he said, "different preparation. Thoughts?" She sniffed, then tasted. Closer, still bitter. "You're over-extracting," meaning too fine a grind. "Coffee bleeds into resentment that way." He smiled faintly. "You make science sound like poetry." "It's not poetry," she said. "It's patience. Something rich people rarely practice." He raised an eyebrow. "You really don't filter your words, do you?" "Would it make the coffee taste better if I did?" Arthur studied her, intrigued. He wasn't used to defiance served so calmly. "You know most people in this building would kill for my approval." "I'm not most people," Amara replied. He nodded slowly as if memorizing the sentence. "Good. Don't be." The rest of the morning passed in a strange rhythm discussion, testing laughter that slipped in unexpectedly between instructions. Arthur had always seen kitchens as systems to control. Amara treated them like living things that needed listening. When she corrected his posture while pouring, her hand brushed his wrist for a brief moment, just skin against skin, but it was enough to startle them both. He pulled back quickly, clearing his throat. "So, patience, you said?" She smiled faintly. "That's the word." Later that afternoon, the new breakfast blend launched. Guests loved it. Reviews mentioned unexpected depth and flavor, refreshing aroma, and finally, a cup worthy of Colin's standards. Arthur read the comments from his office window, a rare glint of pride in his eyes. But pride wasn't the only thing stirring. When he called Amara up to congratulate her, she arrived cautious, wiping her hands on her apron. "You saved our morning reputation," he said. "How does it feel?" "Temporary," she said. "Good coffee doesn't erase bad assumptions." He frowned. "What assumptions that people like me can't contribute unless we're cleaning up someone else's mess?" Arthur hesitated. "I don't think of you that way." She looked straight at him. "Maybe not consciously. But when you asked what I was doing in your suite that night, you didn't think chemist. You thought intruder." Her words hit harder than he expected. She turned to leave. "Don't worry, I'm used to it." He stood frozen, watching her walk away, realizing that for all his success, there were worlds he still didn't understand. Downstairs, as Amara rejoined the staff lounge, the whispers started again. "Guess she thinks she's special now. She's got the boss wrapped around her finger." "Typical. Play the sympathy card." Carla glanced at her concern written all over her face. "Ignore them." Amara sat down, staring at her calloused hands. "I can't. They're not wrong. I am different. But they'll never see why." That night, as the city lights flickered outside her apartment window, Amara brewed a small pot of her own coffee beans she'd saved up for weeks to buy. She lifted the cup to her nose, inhaling deeply. It smelled of earth fire and something else truth, the kind that didn't wash off no matter how many uniforms you wore. And somewhere across town, Arthur Collins stared at his untouched espresso, realizing for the first time in his life that perfection meant nothing if it wasn't shared. The day after the new breakfast launch, the hotel kitchen was quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just waiting, like the eye of a storm. Amara could feel it the moment she walked in. The conversation stopped, replaced by the metallic rhythm of knives on cutting boards. The smell of roasted beans and tension hung in the air. "Morning," she said softly. No one replied. Chef Laurent stood near the counter, arms crossed, his expression carved in disdain. "Well, if it isn't our savior," he said. "Come to teach us again how to boil water." Amara forced a calm smile. "Depends. Are you still burning it?" A few of the younger cooks bit back laughter. Laurent's jaw tightened. "Mr. Collins might be impressed with your theatrics, but this is my kitchen. You are not part of my team." "I'm not here to be part of it," Amara replied. "I'm here to make sure your food doesn't taste like regret." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The door swung open. Arthur Collins stepped inside, tablet in hand. "Everything all right?" Laurent immediately straightened. "Of course, sir. We were just discussing methodology." Arthur's eyes shifted to Amara. "And what's your methodology, Ms. Johnson, listening," she said. "To what the ingredients want to be, not what we can afford to make them." Arthur smiled faintly. A poetic answer. Chef Laurent shrugged stiffly. "We will see how far poetry gets us in business." Arthur turned to the staff. "Last night's breakfast reviews were excellent. But don't thank me. Thank Ms. Johnson. She'll be working with us for the next few weeks to improve consistency." The silence that followed was icy. Laurent's nostrils flared. "You're replacing my sous chef with a maid." "No," Arthur said calmly. "I'm adding perspective." "Perspective," Laurent repeated. "Sir, with respect, this is not a charity. The hotel's reputation cannot be built on pity projects." Amara felt the words like tiny blades under her skin. She didn't look down. "You think talent is pity." He turned to her. "I think talent requires education. Discipline. Not luck." Arthur's voice cooled. "Discipline is cleaning 60 rooms a day and still showing up on time. Education is learning without a classroom. You might consider both before judging who deserves a place here." The room went utterly still. Laurent looked like he'd been slapped. Amara met Arthur's gaze for a brief second, gratitude mixed with disbelief. Then she turned back to the chef. "Let's work." She spent the next hours moving through the kitchen like someone reclaiming her language. She showed them how to identify flavor imbalances, how temperature affected acidity, how smell could predict mistakes before they happened. Some cooks watched with skepticism, others with quiet fascination. Laurent pretended indifference, but kept stealing glances when he thought no one noticed. At one point, she caught him adjusting a sauce temperature exactly the way she had explained earlier. She didn't comment. Change never happened through arguments, only results. By noon, the tension had thinned into exhaustion. Arthur returned just as Amara was cleaning up her station. "How's our progress?" he asked. Laurent hesitated. "Acceptable." Arthur smiled. "That's French for good, right?" The chef muttered something inaudible and walked away. Arthur turned to Amara. "You handled that better than I expected." "I've had practice," she said, wiping her hands. "You think kitchens are tough? Try convincing a landlord you'll pay rent next week when your check's already late." He studied her face. "I didn't realize how much strength it takes to survive my world from the outside." Her tone softened. "And I didn't realize how blind it looks from the inside." Arthur nodded slowly. "Fair exchange." As she started to leave, he said, "You're making enemies." "I was born with them," she replied. "At least now they've got faces." That night in the employee cafeteria, the whispers turned into full-blown rumors. "She's sleeping with him. She's using the race card. She's going to get us all fired." Carla slammed her tray down beside Amara's. "They're loud today." Amara poked at her food. "They're scared." "Of what change? Or maybe of seeing someone like me in a place they were taught we don't belong." Carla leaned closer. "Girl, you sure you know what you're doing?" "No," Amara admitted, "but I know what I'm not doing, shrinking." The next morning, a note waited in her locker. "Know your place," written in thick black marker. No signature. She stared at it for a long moment, then folded it neatly and slipped it into her pocket. Not because she accepted it, but because she wanted to remember. Later, as she entered the main dining area to deliver a tasting tray for Arthur's meeting, she caught sight of herself reflected in the polished silver, the same uniform, the same weary eyes. Yet something had shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore, and visibility she knew was dangerous. Arthur met her gaze from across the room mid-conversation with investors. Just a glance, but it lingered acknowledgement without words. Laurent noticed too. His expression hardened. The next day, the kitchen's supplier delivery mysteriously forgot to include the new blend of beans Amara had recommended. The breakfast spread was delayed, guests complained, and the blame fell quickly and predictably on her. She changed the schedule, one sous chef said. She handled the inventory list, another added. Arthur demanded to see the reports himself. When he realized the supplier's signature had been forged, his voice turned cold. "Who did this?" No one answered. Amara stepped forward. "Does it matter? You'll hear the same silence either way." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. We'll find another supplier, and from now on all purchases go through you." Laurent's jaw dropped. "Through her." "Through her," Arthur repeated. "She's the only one here who hasn't lied to me." Amara said nothing, but when she walked out that day, every whisper behind her sounded less like gossip and more like surrender. For the first time, the hotel's flawless facade had cracked, not from scandal, but from truth. And beneath the shine of marble and money, something new was beginning to brew. The first thing Amara noticed when she stepped into the lobby that morning was the silence that followed her. It wasn't the ordinary pause of curiosity. It was heavy or deliberate, the kind of silence that pretends to smile while measuring your worth. She'd become the subject of the hotel's unofficial newsletter, the one whispered between staff lockers and polished hallways. She's sleeping with him. She's playing the race card. It's all an act. She's after money. Every rumor had its own accent, its own rhythm of malice. Carla found her folding linen in the laundry room, her face tight with worry. "Girl, you seen what they're saying on the staff group chat? They posted a picture of you and Mr. Collins in the kitchen. Caption says, 'New management style intimate supervision.'" Amara froze mid-fold. "You're kidding, I wish I was. They even added emojis. You know, the kind that say everything without words." Amara sighed and sat on the folding table. "I guess when a black woman gets noticed, it can't be for her work." Carla shook her head. "You shouldn't have to go through this." "Shouldn't," Amara said softly, "but do." Later that day she was called to the executive dining room. Arthur was already there, standing near the tall windows overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered bright and unreachable, like everything else in his world. He turned as she entered. "You heard the rumors." "I don't need to," she said. "They echo louder than the espresso machine." Arthur frowned. "I've spoken to HR. They're investigating." "That's not going to stop them," she said quietly. "You can't file a report against jealousy." He studied her face. "Does this bother you?" She hesitated, then answered truthfully, "Yes. Not because of what they say, but because of who believes it." Arthur leaned against the window ledge, crossing his arms. "People always talk." "Not about you," she countered. "When you walk in a room, they call it leadership. When I walk in, it's luck. Or scandal." The honesty in her tone stopped him cold. He looked away out at the horizon. "You know, when I hired my first black executive years ago, investors told me I was chasing optics. I told them talent doesn't have a color, but I never realized how different it feels when the target isn't me." Amara gave a faint smile. "Welcome to my daily commute." He looked back at her, something like respect or guilt flickering in his eyes. "Then I suppose we have to change the narrative." "How?" she asked. "You can't lecture prejudice out of people." "No," he admitted, "but you can make them uncomfortable enough to question it." That afternoon, Arthur summoned the entire kitchen staff for an unannounced tasting demonstration. Every chef-server and manager gathered around the long counter, murmuring curiously. Amara stood beside him, aware of the stares, some mocking, some hostile. Arthur addressed the room. "You all know Ms. Johnson. You've heard the stories. Now you'll hear the truth through her work." He gestured toward the plates before them. "These are dishes prepared by 2 of our top chefs and 1 prepared by Ms. Johnson. None are labeled. You'll taste and vote for the best." Laurent scoffed. "Sir, this is hardly participate or step aside," Arthur said sharply. Reluctantly, the tasting began. Staff sampled each plate, murmuring among themselves. When the results came in, the majority had voted for plate C. Arthur smiled. That one, he said, was Ms. Johnson's. A wave of whispers ran through the room. Laurent's face turned the color of overripe tomatoes. Arthur continued, "Prejudice is a lazy palate. It dulls your senses until you can't tell excellence when it's right in front of you. If this kitchen is to carry my name, it will be based on taste, not titles." He looked at Amara. "Congratulations, Ms. Johnson. You've just earned a new role, quality consultant." Amara blinked. "That's not necessary, Mr. Collins." "It is," he said. "Talent deserves recognition, not rumor." As applause, hesitant but real, rippled through the room, Amara caught sight of Carla clapping proudly near the door. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen for what she was not, what she was accused of being. But not everyone shared that feeling. That evening, as she left the hotel, a sleek silver car pulled up beside the curb. The tinted window slid down, revealing a woman with pale skin and a scarlet smile. "Ms. Johnson," the woman said smoothly. "I'm Madeline Pierce. We haven't met yet. Amara frowned. Should we have? I used to run this hotel's PR division, and I used to run Mr. Collins's schedule and occasionally his heart. Amara stiffened. Congratulations. Madeline smiled wider. Be careful, darling. This place eats people like you alive. It loves your novelty, but never your permanence. The window rolled up, leaving Amara staring at her own reflection in the glass, tired eyes, uniform, wrinkled shoulders squared. For a moment, she wondered if Madeline was right. Back in her apartment, she poured herself a cup of coffee, her hands trembling slightly. The aroma rose like an anchor grounding her. She thought about quitting, about peace, about silence. Then she remembered the note in her locker. Know your place. She whispered into the empty room. I already do. The next morning, when Arthur entered the kitchen, he found Amara already there, early, precise, and unshaken. Did you sleep at all? He asked. Enough, she said. We have a menu to fix. He studied her, realizing that what the others saw as defiance was really endurance. You know they'll keep talking, he said quietly. I know, she replied. So let's give them something worth talking about. Arthur smiled faintly. You're dangerous, Ms. Johnson. Amara met his gaze, only to mediocrity. Outside the kitchen doors, whispers still traveled through the hallways, but this time they sounded different. Not just gossip, not just prejudice. Something else was spreading too, respect grudging and reluctant, but real. And though Amara didn't know it yet, those whispers were the beginning of a revolution far louder than words. 2 days after Madeline Pierce's warning, Amara was cleaning the executive corridor when Arthur's assistant found her. Mr. Collins wants to see you in his office, the woman said. Voice cool and precise, the way people talk when they're careful not to sound surprised. Amara wiped her hands on her apron. Is this about the menu revisions? The assistant shook her head. He didn't say. Just wear something that isn't a uniform. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual. The mirrored walls reflected her uncertainty from every angle. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him or anyone define her again. Yet here she was, heart pounding, drawn into his world once more. Arthur was by the window when she entered, hands in his pockets, the city sprawling behind him like a painting of ambition. Ms. Johnson, he said, turning with a smile too easy to be casual. You're right on time. I was already in the building, she replied. Hard to be late when you never leave. He chuckled softly. Fair point. Sit. She didn't. You could have called, you know. I could have, he agreed, but this conversation deserves more than a phone call. Amara crossed her arms. Is this about the rumors again? Because if it is, it's about Paris, he interrupted. She blinked. Paris. There's an international culinary conference next week, he said. The hotel's brand will be represented there. I want you to come with me. Her first reaction was laughter, the short, startled kind that slips out when reality feels absurd. You want me, a cleaning staff member, to fly to Paris with you to talk about food? Arthur's smile didn't falter. Not to talk, to taste, to advise. You have a sharper palate than half the critics in that room. She stared at him, unsure whether to be flattered or offended. You do realize how this looks, right? After everything they're saying, I do, he said simply. But I stopped making decisions based on whispers. Amara shook her head. That's easy for you to say. You own the whispers. Arthur stepped closer. You told me once that people like you have to work twice as hard to be half awake. So wake them up, Miss Johnson. Show them what hard work looks like. Something in his tone softened her resistance, not because it was persuasive, but because it sounded sincere. Still, she hesitated. Paris isn't just another shift, she said. It's a different world. People there don't look like me. They don't look like me either, he said, a faint smirk returning. They look better dressed. That made her laugh despite herself. You're serious about this, completely. She studied him for a long moment. Why me? Arthur's gaze held hers. Because I trust you to tell the truth even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient. Amara's voice dropped to a whisper. That's going to cost you. He nodded. Then I'll pay. When she returned home that night, Carla was waiting outside her apartment, arms folded. "You look like you just got recruited by NASA," Paris, Amara said blankly. Carla blinked. "Paris, Georgia." Amara shook her head. "France." Carla's jaw dropped. "Girl, he's taking you out the country? That's either a promotion or a setup," both Amara said. "And I don't know which scares me more." She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, listening to the hum of traffic, the soft cries of trains in the distance, the sounds of her city, the place that had both caged and raised her. Somewhere out there, her mother was still working the night shift at the hospital, probably telling her coworkers about her daughter who almost became a scientist. Amara whispered into the dark, "Maybe it's not too late." 3 days later, she found herself at the airport suitcase borrowed from Carla, passport nearly expired, anxiety packed heavier than her clothes. Arthur was waiting near the gate, immaculate in a dark suit. When he saw her, his expression warmed. "You made it." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "My cab driver asked if I was sure I was supposed to be in the international terminal." Arthur's jaw tightened. People and their assumptions. She smiled thinly. "I'm used to it." He gestured toward the boarding line. "Let's prove them wrong." The flight was long, the kind of long that turns thoughts into ghosts. Arthur slept through most of it, but Amara couldn't. She kept staring out the window, watching the clouds drift below endless white borderless. When they landed, Paris was bathed in gold evening light. The air smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. Everything looked like a movie she couldn't afford to watch. The hotel was another world, entirely chandeliers, like constellations. Carpets soft as clouds, guests dressed in elegance that whispered old money. As they entered the grand lobby, a concierge greeted Arthur with a smile that dimmed when his eyes shifted to Amara. "Good evening, Mr. Collins. Your suite is ready." "And your associate," Arthur's tone cooled. "Her name is Ms. Johnson. She'll be staying with us." The man's smile stiffened. "Of course, sir." Amara caught the subtle glance, the small twitch of disbelief. She'd seen it before at banks, at restaurants, in classrooms. The polite face of exclusion. Later in her room, smaller though still luxurious beyond imagination, she stared at her reflection in the gilded mirror. The woman staring back looked both out of place and exactly where she belonged. That night, Arthur knocked on her door. "You ready for tomorrow?" She nodded. "I'm not here to impress anyone." "Good," he said. "You're here to remind them what excellence looks like." As he turned to leave, she called after him, "Mr. Collins." He looked back. "Why are you really doing this?" His expression softened. "Because every empire needs its truth-teller." When he left, Amara sat on the bed, the city glowing outside her window. Somewhere beneath the glitter and pride, she could feel it, the quiet tension that always followed her into new spaces. The air was different here, but the rules were the same. They would smile, they would doubt, and she would prove them wrong. One taste, one truth at a time. The morning of the conference dawned gray and glittering. Paris wore its elegance like armor. Rain polished the cobblestones, and even the puddles reflected cathedrals. Amara woke before sunrise. Her nerves buzzed louder than the city traffic. Carla's voice echoed in her head. "Keep your chin up even when they look down." She wore the only dress she'd packed that wasn't a uniform, a simple navy piece that hugged her shoulders and fell to her knees. Modest, functional, borrowed. She looked at herself in the mirror and whispered, "You belong." When she stepped into the hotel lobby, heads turned not because of what she wore, but because she was there at all. A black woman in a sea of tailored suits and pearls. Arthur approached, dressed in charcoal gray, his expression calm but alert. "You ready? As I'll ever be." The conference hall was a cathedral of culinary prestige chandeliers, white linen tables, and the faint hum of self-importance. Michelin-starred chefs, investors, and critics filled the space. Every accent sounded expensive. Amara followed Arthur through the crowd, aware of the whispers that trailed behind them. Who is she? An assistant, maybe. No too confident for that. A French journalist stopped Arthur near the champagne bar. "Monsieur Collins." "Welcome." "And your companion?" Arthur smiled tightly. "My consultant, Ms. Johnson." The journalist blinked. "Ah, fascinating." "A consultant?" He looked at Amara with polite disbelief, then added in French, "C'est original." Amara's French was rusty, but she caught the meaning. "That's original." Arthur saw the flicker in her expression. "You speak French enough to know when I'm the punchline." Before he could respond, an announcer called the audience to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the International Culinary Symposium. Please take your seats." They sat near the front. On stage, a row of white-coated chefs prepared a live tasting demonstration, the air filled with the smell of butter and citrus. One of the judges turned, scanning the crowd. "We'd like a volunteer to evaluate the pairing." His gaze paused on Amara. "Perhaps." "Mademoiselle, you seem intrigued." Amara froze. Dozens of faces turned toward her. Arthur whispered, "You don't have to." "I know," she said. "That's why I will." She rose, walked to the stage. The lights were brighter there, merciless. A chef handed her a small glass of wine and a plated appetizer no larger than her palm. "Please," he said with a hint of challenge, "tell us what you think." She inhaled the aroma cream lemon zest white pepper. Then she tasted. The flavors danced, but fell flat at the end like a story with no conclusion. "The sauce is rich," she said clearly, "but the acidity is unbalanced. The lemon was added too late. It fights, it doesn't blend. And the pairing. The wine's oak notes smother the seafood instead of lifting it." The room went silent. Then, to everyone's shock, the head judge nodded. "She's right." The chef blinked. "Pardon, the mademoiselle is correct. The pairing is off. The timing, too. Exactement." A ripple of laughter, not mockery this time, but surprise, spread through the audience. Cameras flashed. Arthur's smile was small, but real. When Amara returned to her seat, he leaned close and whispered, "You just made a room full of egos taste humility." She exhaled slowly. "I was just honest. That's exactly what terrifies them," he murmured. After the panel, people began to approach cautiously at first, then eagerly. A sommelier asked her opinion on his blend. A chef invited her to try his truffle reduction. By midday, she was no longer invisible. She was the woman who spoke truth on stage. But not everyone celebrated it. As the afternoon sun poured through the tall windows, Amara caught sight of a familiar red smile in the crowd, Madeleine Pierce flawless in cream silk. She approached like perfume, subtle, intoxicating, and suffocating. "Arthur," she said smoothly, "always a pleasure." Arthur's shoulders tensed. "Madeleine." Her gaze slid to Amara. "And you must be the reason my invitation got lost this year." Amara smiled politely. "Maybe it's in the mail." Madeleine laughed, the kind of laugh meant to draw eyes. "How refreshing. I must say you've become quite the sensation. A modern Cinderella, except you skipped the fairy godmother and went straight for the CEO." Amara met her gaze evenly. "And you skipped the fairy tale altogether. How's that working out?" Arthur almost choked on his drink. "Ladies." But Madeleine wasn't done. "Don't take it personally, darling. The world loves a novelty. Just be careful they applaud you today, but they won't remember your name tomorrow." Amara's voice was calm, but every word cut clean. "Then I'll make sure they taste it instead." For a second, something flickered in Madeleine's eyes. Irritation, maybe fear. Then she smiled again and walked away. Arthur let out a quiet breath. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Amara said. "You don't tame wolves by running." He studied her profile, the calm focus, the quiet fire. "You keep surprising me, Ms. Johnson." She turned to him. "No, you're just finally paying attention." That evening, back at the hotel, Amara stood by her window watching Paris shimmer below. The Eiffel Tower's lights blinked against the dark like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing outside looking in. She was in the room, and she'd made them listen. But she also knew something else. The higher you climbed into someone else's world, the stronger the wind tried to push you back down. And somewhere in that glittering city behind a red smile and designer perfume, the wind was already rising. The second day of the Paris conference began with applause that didn't belong to her. It belonged to Arthur Collins, the charming American CEO with the clean reputation and the perfect suit. As cameras flashed, Amara stood just behind him, half shadow, half spectator. The morning presentation had been a success. The media loved him. They called him a visionary of modern hospitality. Not one mentioned the woman who'd saved his brand from stale coffee and soulless menus. She told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't here for applause. But it still stung, that same quiet sting she'd felt all her life when her work earned praise, just not her name. When the conference adjourned for the day, Arthur turned to her. "You handled yesterday beautifully. Everyone's been asking about you." "Funny," she said. "They didn't ask me." He frowned. "You're still angry." "I'm still invisible," she corrected. He opened his mouth to respond, but a familiar voice interrupted. Arthur Madeline Pierce glided toward them, her red lipstick bright as a warning sign. Every head turned. She looked like the embodiment of confidence or entitlement. Maybe both. Arthur's jaw tensed. "Madeline." She smiled, ignoring Amara completely. "You didn't call last night. I thought perhaps you'd forgotten your old friends." "I was working," Arthur said, his tone clipped. Madeline finally turned to Amara. "So you're the famous Ms. Johnson. I must say the stories don't do you justice." Amara tilted her head. "What stories?" "Oh, the usual ones. The cleaning lady with the golden nose. The girl who caught the boss's attention professionally, of course." Her eyes glinted. "Though Paris loves a good scandal." Arthur stepped in. "Enough, Madeline." But Amara raised a hand. "It's fine. I've heard worse, though, usually from people less creative." A few onlookers chuckled quietly. Madeline's smile stiffened. "Well, creativity is what separates class from chaos," she said. "And Paris, darling, is very selective about which it allows." Amara's voice was soft but steady. "So is Atlanta. We just stopped pretending our racism had accents." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Madeline blinked, recovering fast. "You're bold, I'll give you that." "Boldness is what happens when patience runs out," Amara said. Arthur quickly intervened. "Ladies, please. This is a business event, not a sparring match." Madeline leaned close to him, her perfume sharp and sweet. "You've changed, Arthur. You used to know which company suited you." Arthur's expression was unreadable. "Maybe I finally do." She laughed, a sound too brittle to be real. "Careful. That kind of talk costs reputation. And investors." Then she turned, heels clicking like punctuation, and disappeared into the crowd. Amara exhaled slowly. "She's not going away, is she?" "No," Arthur said. "Madeline doesn't retreat. She reloads." Later that evening at a private dinner for sponsors, Madeline's prophecy proved true. The event was lavish crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and too much perfume in the air. Amara felt every eye on her as she entered beside Arthur. At the center of the room, Madeline was already seated, surrounded by journalists and investors. She waved them over. "Arthur, come join us." Reluctantly, they did. The conversation flowed like wine, smooth, artificial, and intoxicating. But beneath every compliment was a question, and beneath every question, a judgment. "So, Ms. Johnson," one of the investors said in a crisp British accent, "how did you two meet, Amara?" Forced a smile. "In a bathroom." The table erupted in laughter, except for Madeline, whose eyes narrowed. Arthur's voice was calm. "She's being literal. She worked for the hotel when we first met." "Ah," said another guest, swirling his drink. "How progressive." The word hung in the air like a mosquito, small, annoying, and meant to sting. Amara's fork clinked softly against her plate. "Progressive would be if you didn't find that surprising." Arthur gave her a quick look, warning or admiration she couldn't tell. Madeline leaned forward, red nails gleaming. "You'll have to forgive them, dear. Not everyone understands social climbing quite as elegantly as you." Amara's voice stayed calm. "And yet some people mistake falling for flying." The table went silent again. Arthur bit back a smile. Madeline's expression froze. After dinner, as the guests drifted away, Arthur caught Amara's arm. "You know you just declared war on her, right? I didn't start it," she said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't happening." He nodded slowly. "You're right. Still, wars have casualties." She looked up at him. "You worried I'll lose?" "No," he said quietly. "I'm worried I will." They walked out of the restaurant into the cool Paris night. The city lights shimmered on the Seine, turning everything gold and unreal. Amara stopped by the bridge railing. "You shouldn't defend me like that," she said. "It makes things worse." Arthur stood beside her, his reflection trembling in the dark water. You think silence makes them better? It makes me survive. He turned toward her. Maybe surviving isn't enough anymore. Something passed between them, not quite an answer, not quite a question. Then Arthur's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Madeline just posted a photo. He showed her it was from dinner. Cropped just right, Arthur and Amara at the same table. Her hand mid-gesture, his face turned toward her. The caption read, "Some partnerships blur the line between business and pleasure." Amara felt her stomach twist. "She's going to make this ugly." Arthur's voice hardened. "Then we'll fight ugly." He put the phone away, eyes fixed on the glowing river below. "You know what Paris taught me, Miss Johnson, what that truth and power make terrible dinner companions. But I'd rather sit with you than anyone else at that table." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she couldn't tell whether the ache in her chest was fear or hope. Above them, the Eiffel Tower flickered again, as if the city itself was listening. And somewhere nearby, behind a glowing screen and a red smile, Madeline Pierce began her next move. Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window watching Paris bleed into dawn. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating messages from Carla, from co-workers back home, even from unknown numbers. "Girl, you trending. They saying you seduced him? You better delete your socials before the trolls find you." Her name was everywhere in hashtags, gossip blogs, and clickbait headlines. The CEO and the cleaning lady, the Cinderella scandal. Love in a 5-star bathroom. Every title was a punchline written in bleach. When she finally looked up from the screen, her reflection stared back, tired eyes, perfect posture, the mask she'd worn her whole life. At 8, a knock came at the door. Arthur stood there, crisp suit jaw tight. His phone was buzzing too. "You saw it?" he asked. "I lived it," she said flatly. "Congratulations, we're famous." He ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't your fault." "It doesn't have to be," she said. "I was born guilty in rooms like these." Arthur's face softened. "Don't say that." "I'll say it because it's true," she replied. "You get called visionary. I get called opportunist. Same story, different headline." He exhaled slowly. "We'll fix it." "I can issue a statement." "A statement," she cut him off. "You think people read apologies? They read what they want. You'll be the man who made a mistake. I'll be the woman who was the mistake." Silence. Finally, he said, "Then tell me what to do." Amara shook her head. "You can't fix what the world was built to break." She brushed past him, heading toward the elevator. He followed. "Where are you going?" "To breathe," she said. "To remember who I was before all this." The city air hit her like a slap-cold reel. She walked without direction until she reached the riverbank. The morning market was setting up nearby, the smell of coffee and bread mingling with rain. For a moment she let herself disappear in the crowd. No stairs, no cameras, just humanity. She bought a coffee from an old vendor who didn't care about her name. When she took the first sip, she almost cried, "Bitter, imperfect, real." "Not bad, huh?" the vendor said in French. "Better than 5-star coffee," she answered, smiling weakly. Back at the hotel, Arthur was pacing his suite. When she returned hours later, his tie was gone, sleeves rolled up, papers scattered across the table. "Where were you?" he demanded, relief and anger colliding in his voice. "Out," she said. "Living." "Amara, you can't just vanish. The press." "The press," she snapped, "doesn't own me. Neither do you." He froze. "That's not what this is." "Isn't it?" she said, stepping closer. "Because right now, I'm standing in a luxury suite being managed like a public image. You want to fix this. Then stop treating me like a headline and start seeing me like a person." He rubbed his temples. "You think I don't see you?" "No," she said quietly. "I think you see me now. But you didn't have to fight for it." He looked up, frustration giving way to something heavier, guilt, maybe grief. "You're right." The words surprised her more than any defense would have. He continued, voice low. "When this started, I thought I was helping you. Turns out I just wanted to feel good about myself, to prove I wasn't like them." She said nothing. "But you," he exhaled, "you didn't need saving. You just needed space to exist." Amara's throat tightened. "And now," he said, "I want to make sure they don't erase you." Before she could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, frowning. "Madeline." "Don't," Amara warned. He answered anyway. "What do you want?" Her voice, loud enough for Amara to hear through the speaker, was honeyed venom. "Damage control." "Arthur, the investors are panicking. I can fix this, but you'll have to issue a denial. Say she exaggerated. Say it was mentorship gone wrong." Amara's chest tightened. Arthur's reply was calm, deliberate. "No." "Arthur," Madeline said sweetly, "this isn't about her color or your pride. It's about your empire. Don't burn it down for a girl you barely know." He ended the call. Amara stood motionless, eyes burning. "She's right about one thing. You barely know me. I know you're the only honest thing that's happened to me in years," he said. The room felt too small for both of them. She turned away. "I should go home." "You mean run?" She faced him. "You think staying is brave? Staying means drowning. Every time I walk into a room I'm not me, I'm a test for how tolerant people think they are. And when they fail, I'm the one who pays." He took a step forward. "Then let me stand with you." Her voice broke. "You can't. You're the storm and the shelter at the same time." He hesitated, then reached out a hand, hovering, not touching. "Amara." Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me in the hotel bar at 3 p.m. If you want the truth about him, come alone." She stared at it, pulse quickening. Arthur noticed her expression. "What is it?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. He frowned. "Don't go." I wasn't planning to, but she was already deciding otherwise. At 3, Amara walked into the dim hotel bar. The air was thick with cigar smoke and secrets, and at the far corner, in a red dress and the same sharp smile, sat Madeline Pierce. "Glad you came," Madeline said, swirling her wine. Amara sat across from her. "Say what you came to say." Madeline slid her phone across the table. On the screen, a photo of her and Arthur at a candlelit dinner, his hand resting near hers. The caption, "Private celebration 2 years ago." Amara stared at it. So dear," Madeline said softly, "you're not his first charity case, just his latest experiment." Amara's jaw clenched. "And you think I'll just believe you?" "I think," Madeline said, smiling thinly, "you're already wondering why he never told you." The wine between them shimmered under the golden light, red as truth, red as lies. And in that moment, Amara realized Paris hadn't just been a trip. It was a test. And everyone around her, including Arthur Collins, might already know the answers. By morning, the city seemed to hum with her name, Amara Johnson. It wasn't just trending anymore, it was everywhere. When she turned on the hotel TV, a news anchor's voice filled the room. "The Collins Grand controversy continues this morning after photos emerged showing CEO Arthur Collins attending private dinners with an employee identified as Amara Johnson." The footage cut to blurry clips, her walking beside him in Paris, laughing at a cafe, his hand brushing hers at a crosswalk. Each frame stripped of context, each gesture turned into a weapon. Amara turned off the screen. The silence afterward felt heavier than the noise. A knock came at the door. Arthur. His tie was gone, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "We need to talk." She didn't move. "You mean you need to talk? I've been talked about enough." He stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. "It's getting worse. Madeline leaked more photos. Half the board's threatening to pull funding unless I issue a statement." "Then issue one," she said, her voice flat. "Tell them I'm a distraction, a mistake. That'll make everyone happy." "Stop it." "Why isn't that what they want?" she said sharply. "A story where the black girl gets put back in her place and the white man redeems himself with a public apology." Arthur's jaw clenched. "I'm not doing that." "Then what are you doing, Arthur?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Trying to figure out how to protect us." "Us," she echoed. "There's no us. There's you, the CEO with everything to lose, and me, the headline everyone's using to sell outrage." She turned away, pacing to the window. Outside, the Eiffel Tower gleamed through the drizzle. "You said Paris was about showing them the truth. But truth doesn't matter here. It never did." He watched her for a long moment. "Then maybe we stop asking for permission to exist." Amara turned back to him. "What does that even mean?" It means I'm calling a press conference. Her breath caught. You're out of your mind. I'm tired of being managed by fear. Let them ask what they want, I'll answer. She shook her head. They'll destroy you. He smiled faintly. Then they'll finally know what it feels like. The next 24 hours were chaos. The hotel's lobby filled with reporters, cameras, microphones, all hungry for blood. Employees whispered as Amara passed. Some avoided her, others offered quiet nods of solidarity. Carla called from Atlanta. Girl, please tell me you're coming home. I can't, Amara said. Not yet. You think he's worth it? Amara hesitated. It's not about him anymore. It's about me. When she hung up, she looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was still tired, but she wasn't ashamed. Not anymore. At noon, the ballroom was transformed into a press stage. Arthur stood behind the podium, his face lit by 100 flashing bulbs. Amara stood in the shadows offstage, heartbeat steady hands, trembling only a little. Arthur began. Good afternoon. You've all heard the rumors. Some of them true, most of them invented, but here's what matters. He paused, scanning the crowd. Amara Johnson is not my mistake. She's the reason my company remembered what integrity tastes like. A murmur swept through the reporters. Flashbulbs fired like lightning. She wasn't hired for pity or attention, he continued. She was promoted because she's better at this than anyone else I've met, including me. If believing in a black woman's talent is a scandal, then I'll wear it proudly. The room erupted in questions. Are you in a relationship? Is this about diversity politics? Will she keep her position? Arthur raised his hand. You want an answer? Yes, I am with her. And no, I'm not ashamed. The noise exploded. Cameras flashed like gunfire. From her place in the corner, Amara froze. The words hit her like both a blow and a lifeline. When the conference ended, the reporters swarmed the exits. Arthur pushed through the chaos until he reached her. You okay? She stared at him. You just threw your career on a bonfire. Maybe he said. But for once, it feels clean. Later that evening, the fallout began. Sponsors withdrew. Investors called emergency meetings. Madeline appeared on a talk show, her red lipstick gleaming like blood under studio lights. Arthur Collins is brilliant, she said smoothly, but he's human. The problem isn't love. It's judgment and poor management. The host nodded. Do you think he's being manipulated? Madeline smiled. Let's just say ambition takes many forms. Amara turned off the television. Arthur was sitting beside her, tie, loosened eyes, tired but steady. She's trying to make you the villain. She doesn't have to try hard, Amara said quietly. The world already wrote the script. He looked at her, then really looked, and said, Then let's rewrite it. For a moment, neither spoke. The city outside buzzed with noise and judgment, but in that small room, something else settled resolve. Arthur, she said finally, you don't understand. When they're done with you, you'll recover. You'll rebuild. I won't. Women like me don't get second chances. We get reminders. He reached out, taking her hand gently. Then we'll make sure this isn't the end of your story. She wanted to believe him. Maybe for that night she did. But as the storm outside grew louder, Amara knew the world wasn't done testing them. The press conference hadn't ended the war, it had declared it. And tomorrow, when the headlines hit every screen in the world, she would wake up not as Amara Johnson, but as the symbol. Symbols she knew didn't get to rest. The ballroom of the Collins Grand Paris was built for celebration, gold-trimmed crystal chandeliers, the kind of lighting meant to flatter wealth. But that morning, it looked more like a courtroom. Every seat was filled. Every camera pointed at the podium. The air buzzed with heat and rumor. Arthur stood in front of the microphones, hands clasped behind his back. His calm was studied, not natural. He was used to audiences that admired him, not ones that waited for him to fail. Amara stood just off stage, her pulse matching the rhythm of the cameras clicking. The last 24 hours had been a blur of headlines and accusations. Collins' affair exposed Cinderella, or con artist love lies and latte foam. She told herself not to care, but she did, because behind every headline she could hear her mother's voice whispering from Atlanta, "Baby, don't let them make you their story." Arthur began speaking. His voice carried easily steady and low. I know you're all here for answers, so let's not waste time with pleasantries. The reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Amara Johnson is not my mistake, he said. She is the most competent, perceptive professional I've ever worked with. The rumors about favoritism or manipulation are false. The only truth here is that she deserves respect, something far too many people have denied her. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The cameras flashed brighter. This isn't about me, he continued. It's about what we choose to believe when we see a black woman standing next to power. Do we assume she earned it, or that she must have slept her way to it? The silence that followed was electric. One reporter, emboldened, shouted from the front row, "Are you confirming a romantic relationship?" Arthur paused. The pause stretched just long enough to make every pen stop moving. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." The room erupted. Questions collided midair. When did it begin? Was she still an employee? Is this a publicity stunt? Amara gripped the edge of the curtain. The word yes still hung in her chest like a live wire. Arthur raised a hand, quieting the storm. What began as professional respect grew into something personal. If that offends anyone, that says more about you than it does about us. Gasps, flashes, chaos. Amara stepped back, needing air. She didn't remember walking out of the ballroom, only that suddenly she was in the empty corridor, her heart pounding. A moment later, Arthur found her. "You walked out," he said softly. "You told the world," she whispered. He met her eyes. "You wanted truth. That's truth." She shook her head. "That's exposure. You just turned us into a headline they can dissect." "They already did," he said. "Now they can't twist it." Before she could reply, Carla's name flashed on her phone. She answered. "Hey." Carla's voice was sharp, protective. "Girl you on TV everywhere." "You okay?" "I'm fine," Amara lied. "You sure?" "Because they're calling you everything from hero to homewrecker. One anchor said, 'You're weaponizing diversity.'" Amara closed her eyes. Of course they did. "Come home," Carla pleaded. "At least for a while." Amara hesitated. "If I go home now, it'll look like guilt. Like I ran." Carla sighed. "You don't owe them staying in the fire." When she hung up, Arthur was still there. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Do what be brave for both of us." She gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe bravery's the only thing I get to keep." Hours later, the hotel's PR team released an official statement drafted by Arthur himself. It wasn't sanitized. It wasn't polished. It was raw. "We are not an affair. We are a reflection of what this world still refuses to accept, that love and merit can exist outside the comfort of expectation." Within minutes, the statement went viral. It sparked debates, op-eds, hashtags. "Stand with Amara" trended beside #boycott Collins. One tweet read, "She's every black woman who's ever been told she's too loud, too smart, too visible." Another read, "Privilege loves to disguise itself as romance." That night, Arthur's board called an emergency meeting. They wanted him to resign temporarily for the good of the company. He refused. When he returned to his suite, Amara was waiting. She'd traded her dress for jeans and a simple blouse. No armor this time. "They're going to crucify you," she said. "They already started," he replied. "But at least they'll have to look me in the eye while they do it." She laughed once, a small sound of disbelief. "You don't quit, do you? Neither do you." For a while they said nothing. The silence between them was fragile, but full not of distance, but of understanding. Finally she asked, "Why did you really do it? That speech?" "The confession." Arthur's voice softened. "Because I was tired of pretending equality is polite. It's not. It's war. And you're the only person I've met who fights it without losing her soul." Amara turned toward the window. Outside, Paris glittered like an apology it would never make. She whispered, "What if they don't stop?" He stepped closer, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "Then we don't either." For the first time since the scandal began, she allowed herself to lean into his warmth, not as a savior, not as a symbol, but as someone who finally saw her. And for that brief fragile moment, the world outside the window with all its headlines, judgments, and cameras disappeared. The next week was a storm without thunder, relentless, invisible, everywhere. The world didn't stop watching. It dissected. It debated. It devoured. Amara's face appeared on news panels, thumbnails, and memes, half of them cruel, the other half claiming to defend her. Every stranger online seemed to have an opinion about what kind of woman she was. She's ambitious, she's manipulative, she's a symbol of change, she's a homewrecker with a degree in playing victim. Each label weighed the same, all of them ways to erase her voice while pretending to understand it. Arthur tried to shield her. He canceled meetings, ignored investor calls, shut down interviews. But the more he protected her, the louder the world screamed, "Why?" The hotel's PR department held crisis briefings that felt more like interrogations. How long has this relationship been going on? Is she leveraging race for sympathy? Can we reassign her quietly before this affects the stock? Arthur walked out of one meeting mid-sentence, slamming the door behind him. That evening in his office, he found Amara sitting by the window, scrolling through comments on her phone. Her expression was unreadable, calm, almost detached. He said softly, "You shouldn't read those." She didn't look up. "You shouldn't either." He stepped closer. "They don't know you." "That's the point," she said, setting the phone down. "They don't have to. They only have to decide what I represent, then they can hate or worship me accordingly." Arthur sighed. "People are cruel when they're afraid." Amara gave a dry laugh. "You think this is fear? This is hunger. They love seeing power stumble, but they love it even more when the one who trips looks like me." He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. She was right. The next day, the backlash turned institutional. One of the board members, an old man named Donahue, demanded Arthur's resignation for the sake of brand stability. Arthur refused. So Donahue leaked internal emails to the press, suggesting misuse of company funds, lies dressed up as documentation. It didn't matter that none of it was true. Truth moved slower than scandal. When Amara arrived that morning, she found Arthur surrounded by security officers and lawyers. The hotel lobby looked like a war room, reporters outside, employees whispering. She approached quietly. "What happened?" Arthur handed her a folder. "They're launching an internal audit. Apparently taking you to Paris counts as corporate misconduct." Her chest tightened. "They're blaming me." "They're blaming me," he corrected. "They're just using you to do it." She closed the folder. "Then fire me." His head snapped up. "What? End it publicly. Say I overstepped. Let them see you choose the company over me. It'll calm things down." "No," he said immediately. "Arthur, I said no." His tone was sharp, but the look in his eyes was something else. Fear not for himself, but for her. "I won't win by sacrificing you," he said. "That's how their world works, not ours." "Arthur," she said quietly, "your world is their world. You just live in it differently." He stepped closer. "Then let's change it." That night, Amara returned to her apartment in silence. The small space felt smaller than ever. The same walls, same secondhand furniture. But now, the world outside those walls was a battlefield. On her kitchen table sat a stack of letters, real ones, not emails. She opened one at random. "Dear Miss Johnson, I work as a server in Houston. They told me I was too dark to be on the front line, so I quit. I saw your video. You made me believe maybe it's not me that's broken. Thank you." Her hands trembled as she read the next one. "You don't know me, but I'm rooting for you. My daughter's 12. She watched your speech and said, 'She looks like me. That matters more than you know.'" The words blurred. Amara pressed a hand to her eyes, fighting back tears. She didn't have time to cry. She stayed up until dawn, reading them letters from women and men, students, janitors, chefs, people who saw something in her that wasn't scandal, but survival. In the morning, she took the stack to Arthur's office. "They're not all hate mail," she said, dropping them on his desk. "Some of them are hope." He opened one, reading quietly. "They believe in you." "They believe in what I represent," she said. "That's heavier than belief." Arthur looked up. "Then maybe it's time you stop being their story and start being your own." That afternoon, he called a meeting with the hotel's remaining leadership. Amara sat beside him, ignoring the disapproving glances. Arthur spoke first. Effective immediately. Ms. Johnson will serve as Cultural Development Director for the Collins Group. Her task: rebuild this company into something worth its name. The room erupted. "This is madness. A PR stunt. You're gambling with our legacy." Arthur's response was cold and simple. "Our legacy means nothing if it's built on silence." When the meeting ended, Amara stayed behind. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said, "I did." She looked at him, really looked, and saw what this cost him: his calm, his reputation, maybe even his empire. "I don't know what happens next," she said. He smiled faintly. "Neither do I. That's the best part." Later that night, Amara stood on the hotel's rooftop, watching the city spread out beneath her lights, flickering like nervous stars. She thought about Atlanta, about the smell of her mother's kitchen, about how far she'd walked just to stand here. For the first time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel borrowed. She felt real. Below her, the lobby was still full of whispers, but this time they weren't about her scandal. They were about her speech, her letters, her name. The world might still be watching, but now it was beginning to listen. 3 months later, Atlanta was buzzing again, not from gossip, but from possibility. The Collins Grand downtown branch had reopened after a quiet renovation. But this time, there was something different about it. The Golden Sea logo over the entrance had been replaced by a simple phrase in brushed steel letters: "Taste belongs to everyone." The idea had been Amara's. The money had been Arthur's, the risk equal. Inside, the new cafe section was already filled with customers: college students, hotel guests, nurses from the nearby clinic, even a few former employees who had once whispered about her. Everyone came for the same reason: the coffee. Not just any coffee. The new blend that Amara designed herself. It wasn't named after her, though Arthur had tried. She called it Second Shift, a tribute to everyone who worked twice as hard for half the credit. That morning, she stood behind the counter adjusting the grinder, the smell of roasted beans filling the air. Her hands moved with precision, scientific, elegant, confident. A small voice interrupted her. "Excuse me, ma'am, is it true you used to be a cleaner here?" Amara turned. A teenage girl stood there, wide-eyed, clutching a notebook. "I still am," Amara said with a grin. "Just a cleaner of bad coffee now." The girl giggled. "I want to study food science too, but my guidance counselor says it's too expensive." Amara leaned closer. "Tell your counselor that science isn't only in classrooms. It's in every flavor you refuse to settle for. Don't let them decide your menu." The girl nodded, her smile shy but determined. When she left, Arthur appeared beside Amara holding 2 steaming mugs. "You've become a legend," he said. "Even the baristas quote you." "I'd rather be useful than legendary," she replied. He raised his cup. "You're both." They stepped aside as a small crowd entered. Journalists this time, but not the predatory kind. These wore smiles, carrying notebooks titled "Profiles in Progress." "Ms. Johnson, one reporter said we heard you're launching a foundation." Amara nodded. "It's called Collins Taste Lab. We'll train underrepresented students in culinary science tuition-free. Real education, real jobs, no quotas." Arthur added, "Our first campus opens next spring in New Orleans. Amara's leading it." The reporter smiled. "How does it feel to go from scandal to pioneer?" Amara answered calmly, "It's not about where I started or where I ended. It's about who I refuse to stop being in between." When the reporters left, Arthur leaned against the counter watching her. "You handled that beautifully." She gave him a playful look. "I've had practice with microphones." "True," he said, "but this time no one's shouting." She looked around the chatter, the laughter, the scent of fresh coffee and warm bread. The world hadn't changed overnight, but it was shifting slowly like sunlight finding its way through storm clouds. Later that afternoon, they walked through the back offices where the Taste Lab's planning boards covered every wall: sketches of training spaces, scholarship applications, notes from students who'd already written letters of interest. Arthur stopped in front of one pinned photo, a group of young chefs from Louisiana smiling with pride. "You did this," he said. "We did this," she corrected. "You gave me a platform. I just built something on it that didn't wobble." He smiled faintly. "You know the board still thinks I'm crazy." "You are," she said. That's what I like about you." They ended up on the rooftop terrace as the city turned amber with evening light. Below, the hotel glowed like a living thing. Above, planes crossed the sky, quiet and distant. Arthur handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Your official title, Executive Partner, Collins Group." She froze. "You're serious, deadly." Her voice softened. That's more than I expected." He looked at her. "It's exactly what you earned." She smiled. "You're learning. I've had a good teacher." For a while they just stood there watching the city pulse beneath them. Then Amara spoke quietly. "You ever think about Paris?" "All the time," he admitted. "Mostly about how badly they brewed coffee." She laughed, but her expression turned reflective. "Sometimes I miss it, not the city, but the feeling of standing in a room where everyone doubted me. There's a strange kind of freedom in having nothing to prove." "You still think you have nothing to prove?" "No," she said. "I think I've finally decided who I'm proving it to." He tilted his head. "Who's that?" "Myself." The last light of sunset caught her face, turning her skin to bronze and gold. For the first time, Arthur realized she didn't just belong in his world, she had built one of her own. When they went back inside, the cafe was nearly empty. Carla was wiping down tables, humming softly. "Boss lady," she called. "We got our first shipment from the school suppliers." Amara grinned. "Already perfect." Arthur watched as she moved across the room, confident, grounded, radiant. The same woman he had once found asleep on a toilet seat now moved like the center of gravity itself. And he knew with quiet certainty that the world would keep trying to define her, but she'd keep rewriting the definitions. As they locked up for the night, Amara flipped the sign on the door to closed and looked at the phrase above it. "Taste belongs to everyone." She whispered to herself, "And so does respect." Then she turned off the lights. The auditorium smelled of roasted beans and new beginnings. It was opening day at the Collins Taste Lab, housed in a renovated warehouse near the New Orleans riverfront. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, landing on rows of stainless steel counters, microscopes, and espresso machines that gleamed like instruments of faith. Students filled the room, 50 of them, from Alabama, Detroit, Harlem, Baton Rouge. Different accents, different skin tones, all holding the same nervous energy Amara once carried. She stood at the podium, notes in her hand, but she didn't need them. Her heart already knew what to say. "Welcome," she began. Her voice was clear, steady, shaped by the long road behind it. "Some of you are here because someone told you that you don't belong in rooms like this. I was one of those people." The crowd listened, silent, attentive. "I started as a cleaning lady at a hotel that served dreams on silver trays. I was invisible until one day I stopped asking for permission to be seen. That's what this place is, permission. Not to exist, but to excel." A few students nodded, eyes glimmering. Arthur stood near the back of the hall, hands in his pockets, watching. His presence no longer overshadowed hers. It supported her. Amara continued. "We'll study chemistry and craft. But more than that, we'll study courage, the kind it takes to walk into a kitchen, a lab, or a boardroom that wasn't built for you and still claim your space." Applause rose, hesitant at first, then full. She smiled, letting the sound wash over her. Afterward, when the crowd dispersed for tours, Arthur approached. "You were brilliant," he said. "I was honest," she replied. "That's harder." He handed her a small card. On it, embossed in silver letters, were the words, "Co-founder, Collins Taste Lab." "Officially official," he said. She laughed softly. "I still can't believe it." "You better start," he said. "You built this." She looked around the hall, the young faces, the smell of possibility. "We built it," she corrected. Arthur nodded. Still stubborn, still right. Outside, the sun blazed over the Mississippi, turning the water to liquid gold. Amara walked to the open doorway, the humid air wrapping around her like a promise. "You remember what Madeline said?" she asked suddenly. Arthur frowned. "Which part?" "That I wouldn't last in a world like yours." She smiled faintly. She was half right. He looked at her curiously. "Half I didn't last in your world," she said, "because I built my own." He reached for her hand, a gesture not of possession, but partnership. "And I'm honored to live in it." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching students wander the campus, laughter echoing through the corridors. One of them, a girl with bright braids and a defiant smile, stopped nearby, holding a tray of freshly brewed coffee. "Ms. Johnson, we tried the new roast you designed. It's incredible." Amara took the cup, inhaled the aroma, smooth, nutty, balanced. She smiled. "You adjusted the temperature, didn't you?" The girl grinned. "Only by 2 degrees, smart," Amara said, handing the cup back. "Keep that curiosity. It'll save you from mediocrity." The girl beamed and hurried off. Arthur watched her go. "You sound like a professor already." "I sound like a woman who finally gets to teach what she loves," she said. They walked toward the main courtyard, where a mural covered the wall painted by local artists commissioned by Amara herself. It showed 2 hands, one dark one, light, both holding a coffee cup overflowing with color, reds, golds, blues. Underneath in bold letters it read, "The flavor of equality." Arthur stopped to admire it. "You really think equality can have a flavor?" She nodded. "It tastes like truth, a little bitter at first, but it wakes you up." He smiled, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Then here's to never sleeping again." That night, as the event ended and the last guests left, Amara returned to the now empty hall. The lights were low, the machines silent, but the air still hummed with what had begun. She walked to the podium again, tracing her fingers along the wood. For a moment she thought of her mother still working late shifts at the hospital, of Carla, who had believed in her before she believed in herself, of every woman who'd ever been told to know her place. She whispered into the quiet "I do." Her reflection in this glass door smiled back, strong, steady, unapologetic. Arthur's voice came from behind her. "You ready to head out?" "In a minute," she said. He waited by the doorway as she switched off the last row of lights. The hall fell into shadow, except for the mural illuminated by the glow of the street lamps outside. Amara took one last look, her heart full. "We made something good," she said. Arthur nodded. "No, you made something better. You made it fair." She smiled, locking the door behind them. "Fair isn't the finish line, Arthur. It's the first step." They stepped out into the night, walking side by side under the hum of city lights. For the first time in her life, Amara Johnson wasn't walking behind anyone. She wasn't chasing acceptance or outrunning judgment. She was walking in her own direction, and the world for once was following her. And somewhere in the quiet between their footsteps, the truth finally settled. She hadn't fallen asleep in the wrong room all those months ago. She'd just been dreaming of the right one,